to the Paranormal Tourists. My name is Tom Jordan. I am your host, and I am joined today by the regular team. Say hello, Dani Magellan.
Hello, Dani Magellan.
Never gets old. Say hello, Sambian.
Hello.
What's your other name, Sambian?
What's my what name?
What do we also know you as?
Oh, the Ghost Gimp, yeah.
The Ghost Gimp.
I think it was my Elven name.
What is your Elven name?
I don't know. Is it backwards?
Is it backwards?
No, it's
I don't
Ghost
know.
Gimp of the Lower Glen.
We'll go with that.
Okay. And providing additional names for Sambian is paranormal expert Ross Andrews.
Bonjour.
Now, before we get started, this particular podcast episode is being recorded a little bit later in the day than it usually would be, and that is because we had an interference from not the spirits today, but a white Nissan.
Has mechanically interfered with me.
Mechanically interfered with paranormal expert Ross Andrews' car.
Yeah, so interfered to the extent it smashed up and written it off. So halfway through this recording, if my phone goes off, it's the insurance company and a tow truck turning up. So if you hear weird noises, that's me just going bye and running out.
We are hoping, however, having pleaded with Ross's about to be written off car, that once it has passed over, we are going to hear something from it.
At least a white feather,
while
maybe.
it passes on to the other side.
Just some soft revving.
A toy car version of it is just going to appear through the letterbox one day. We should probably move on to the whole paranormal thing.
Yeah,
Right?
why not?
Might as well.
Whilst we're here.
I thought I would kick off today with spontaneous combustion.
Oh, have you done a lot of research on spontaneous?
I have done a lot of
Could
research.
you possibly tell us where your research has come from?
I can indeed. So I'm gonna be delivering a lot of the facts. That's the loose word, isn't it? The facts surrounding spontaneous combustion from a particular tome, Amazing Spooks and Mysteries.
Wow,
for anyone who's not familiar
That sounds amazing.
with the book. So, spontaneous combustion. Now, this is a weird thing, right? Weird thing. For anyone who's not familiar with spontaneous combustion, I have to take some time to say that. Spontaneous combustion. It's essentially the act of a person unexpectedly and seemingly without cause bursting into flames.
Or to put it in a shorter form, spontaneously combusting.
Spontaneously combusting. They don't typically survive this, unsurprisingly. And generally speaking, there's something additionally strange about it. So, for example, Mary Reeser, I hope I'm pronouncing that surname right, in 1951, burnt to death on the night of the 1st of July in her apartment in St. Petersburg, Florida, USA. What was particularly strange about this, and this seems to be a factor that appears quite a lot in tales of spontaneous combustion, is that the heat. There was a suggestion that it possibly been caused by a cigarette burning, something like this, which would make sense, but it's the level of heat involved in the incident that they can't generally explain in this particular situation. So for example, it was actually, according to this particular description of the story, it was actually investigated by the American Federal Bureau of Investigation, by which I assume they mean the FBI, but I can't help thinking like maybe there's a knockoff like AFBI that's sort of like a side one.
There's 2 or 3 guys in a pub
Slightly
that call
less
themselves the AFBI.
official. But the suggestion here that it actually says this was no ordinary death by fire.
Oh, as opposed to the hundreds of
incredibly
others.
ordinary death by fire, because the fire had actually been intense enough to crack a mirror and melt several plastic objects in the room. The fire itself had, in actual fact, in terms of visual evidence, aside from that, had only actually existed where this lady was stood. And that seems to be quite typical. I mean, this particular fantastic tome has several references, and I won't go into the huge detail.
They do have a tendency to be very localised when it comes to spontaneous.
This is the particularly strange thing. There's one here about Mrs. Mary Carpenter. One day in 1938, Mrs. Mary Carpenter was boating on the Norfolk Broads, lovely, in England. where we are now, with her husband and children when suddenly she burst into flames. Which put a bit of a dampener on the day, which is something she probably could have done with at that
all
point.
the
Is damn
explanations,
the right word?
all the explanations for spontaneous combustion, none of them take into account the literally spontaneous in front of people. I don't know if you've got it in your fantastic book there, but there was one of somebody at a ballroom dance and dancing with their partner, and oh, that's my phone going off. That's it. That's the insurance company. They spontaneously combusted on the dance floor in their partner's arms, as it were, and flames just sort of shot out of them, and they just burst into flames in front of everybody.
Wow.
Witnessed by about 200 people.
Fire at the disco.
There was a family as well where I think the parents were almost implicated. I feel like there was a house fire anyway, but then they found kind of charred remains that couldn't be explained of 3 of the bodies where they were just incinerated, like locally.
It's that intensity, I think. It's the word incinerated. I mean, there is another one here.
Not locally to us now, I meant locally to where they were.
Is this your murdering spree? You did it in the garden.
And they think the fire was like a...
You heard it here first.
They were worried about
there was a case in
witchcraft or something,
America.
like being accused of
There was a
something,
case in America of a girl that was having a... Sorry, that is the insurance company phoning us now. Hang on.
From beyond.
Tom, hello again. I've just come back in.
Hello.
What did I miss
Hello.
out on?
What did you miss out on? Spontaneous combustion.
You spontaneously combusted.
But came back. It was
wow.
weird.
But here we are.
And spontaneous regeneration as well.
Spontaneous regeneration. So, spontaneous combustion. In conclusion, what do we all think? So, spontaneous combustion. So, it seems to be that there's this kind of I mean, as is the case, generally speaking, with paranormal stories, there's this sense in each one, in each tale, that there's something that's unexplainable, but it frequently seems to be something to do with the intensity of the heat or the kind of localization of the...
There is a theory called the wick theory, and it's got... Sorry, that's the insurance going through on my phone again there. There's going to be a lot of phone calls during this. There is a theory called the candle or wick theory, where somebody passes out, for example, they might be drunk or something, overdosed, or they whilst they're holding a cigarette, or there's a candle nearby, and the body acts like wax to some extent. So it's a small flame, burns, and because it's like a candle flame, it's sort of very intense heat in one tiny area but nowhere else, and so the whole body acts like a candle and just slowly burns. So the clothing the person's wearing is like the wick, and the fat in the person acts like the candle wax. And they kind of slowly melt. But because they're unconscious, or they were already dead to start with, something like that, and I think one of them, the stories might have been the one you were talking about first of all, where somebody died and they're saying it might have been a cigarette that it sets fire to the chair, for example. And this is a lot of those old stories were chairs that had old foam in it, which goes up and gives a lot of smoke, and so they may have passed out from the smoke inhalation and be dead, but the flame itself isn't that big, and so they just slowly burn like a candle, which just burns everything around them and nothing else, which would account for the fact that you haven't got this massive flame giving it sort of blackening the ceiling and all that kind of thing as well. But that doesn't explain some of the ones that have been literally spontaneous, like you said, a woman in a boat going up and all that kind of thing. And so it doesn't explain those.
The one which you may or may not have missed is...
where the clothes were still
so
intact.
the clothes were still intact. So the lady had burned.
That really... although you don't... A lot of the stories of spontaneous combustion, as far as I'm aware, and I may be wrong, but you don't hear of it so much now.
No.
Well, this is what I was saying about the theories where old style foam that went up, things were a lot more combustible.
Yes.
In olden times. Also, man-made fibres.
Olden day.
There's a theory that certain people, the oils in their skins and so on like this, they're giving off a particular chemical. And one thing was, this was noticeable back, I think they did a study back in the 50s, and it was about alcoholics had a tendency to spontaneously combust. And so perhaps it's the alcohol content in them, and the man-made fibres they're wearing are creating static sparks, and they're setting fire to themselves in that way. And it's just when you've seen the spontaneous combustion live in front of you, quite often it's just somebody goes up in flames and there's no actual lasting damage. They put the flames out, there's no burn on the skin there, anything like that. And it might be that they've literally just, like when you ignite the alcohol off a cake,
Sure.
off a Christmas pudding or whatever, and it might just be like that. It seeped out of your skin, it's
And
created
something
a
has caught
spark,
you.
it's gone up, you've put it out, and that's it. So there's a few different theories.
I mean, the burn to death one, which was the last one I was talking about. All that was left of her body was a pile of charred ashes. There had been no fire in the room anywhere else, and her clothes were completely. I mean,
that
there's something.
sounds like the candle theory.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's something slightly suspicious in the fact. So nothing else had been touched.
There was
it's just her
literally
ashes,
nothing.
and
Yeah.
her clothes are fine. I feel.
If there's literally nothing, that sounds like someone's come in,
Maybe
murdered
she's-
a body, and just brought it
Yeah.
back again.
Yeah, maybe she's
Chucked clothes.
been burnt to death
Yeah.
somewhere else. Her ashes have been put down, and
Yeah.
you know,
I do think out of the things we've discussed, and I still think there's a lot, that kind of, if it's happened right in front of people, then it is harder to explain. However, I would suggest that this one can be chalked up to our old friend, the science snake,
the science.
Rearing his evil head.
rearing his ugly, disappointing, logical head. I feel like maybe. No.
The science
I
snake.
do wonder whether spontaneous combustion is
strikes
just one of
again.
those cases of us not being caught up quite with the science. So we can, all the science.
Or possibly situations like where somebody has been murdered, burnt, and then
it's been pinned on spontaneous combustion.
It will be in
Which
Forensic Files, Series 27,
Yeah.
Episode 3.
CSI Solihull.
So I do wonder
CSI
whether that's
Science Snake. For those with a lisp, it's CSI Science Snake.
Well, I think that
brings us neatly on to whatever Dani is going to talk about.
that puts a fire blanket over spontaneous combustion.
Oh, can I say that was art? That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Seamless.
Yeah.
So hot that it almost
It was
created
supernatural. It really was.
spontaneous combustion. Certainly paranormal. Danny,
Hello.
what do you have for us this week?
So this week I have been looking at and interested in the is it a phenomenon? No, I don't think it is. So the concept of the kind of spiritual talent, if you will, or people having a spiritual sense. The gift. There we go. Thank you. The gift being passed on through generations. So, for example, one of the reasons I
Inherited
was
psychic ability.
Yes, there we go. Those are the actual
Paranormal
words.
expert Ross
Paranormal expert.
Andrews.
That's what he's here for.
So, for example, my nana was quite in tune, or would say she was in tune. My mum would say that she was relatively in tune, and my mum would say that I was relatively in tune. Having had a couple of instances.
I've heard her sing. She's not relatively in tune.
No, I am not in tune. But for example, what made it quite interesting for me is that I apparently, when I was little, I saw my nana on an occasion, and she sort of gave me a message that I relayed to my mum. Now it can probably be explained, but my mum doesn't know how, because she says there's no reason or no rhyme why I would know that. The reason I bring it up is because recently my very own daughter
Has levitated and her head
yeah, she's in the room at the moment on the ceiling chatting to Nana. No, she is not. She's at ballet. But she couldn't sleep one night, and I went up and I asked her. She wasn't scared, but she said that there was a man in the room, and he kept talking, wouldn't stop talking. At which point I thought, okay, good, well, we'll burn the house down. And but she has mentioned this man since, but she doesn't seem at all frightened or...
No, just to clarify, that you didn't have a baby intercom in the room at the time, did you?
No, we do not use any kind of...
And there wasn't an actual man.
And there was no actual man. I did check the room, yeah. There's we don't have a lodger, just turns out there was a man and he's quite chatty. But it made me think that, it's something I've always been very interested in, anything kind of paranormal I've always been very interested in, but I've never... So someone said to me that maybe I needed to develop, like it was a gift that maybe I had, but I needed
Kodak
to develop.
Psychic department.
Yeah, go down to
Boots,
Boots, ask them to just tune me in. But yeah, it really interested me, that idea of it passing through, and then why doesn't it pass through to some families? And then there's the suggestion that actually, when I was doing some reading on it, that it passes down the female line.
The mitochondrial DNA.
But then I thought, is that because, and this is terrible of me to say really, but historically women are maybe a bit more suggestible or a bit more creative or a bit more like have that sort of... Are they more likely to believe in it? Are men more likely to sort of dismiss it?
Well, I had like when I was younger, I used to work in a fish and chip shop, and I was working one night and we were closing, and this lady walked past. She must have walked past about 4 times during the and we knew her. She kept coming. She used to come in all the time, but I never served her, and I started to serve. And she walked past and she kept looking at me. And I was like, what's she doing? And as we were closing, there was no one in. So she came in, poked her head, and she was like, "Oh, can I have a word with you?" I was like, "Yeah, cool." She came over and she was like, "You're very special." I was like, "Okay, thank you." And she was like,
"How did she know?"
And she was like, "The man that gave you the chain that you wear around your neck." And I had you had to have the buttons all the way done up, so I could. And she was like, the man that gave you the chain around your neck, he loves you and he always will, although he was a daft old man. And she said, "I just want you to know that you're special and keep being special." And then she left. And it was my granddad's chain that he gave me.
Okay.
And
at which point she handed me her phone number and said, "Call me."
And it was just really, it was really odd, like stuff like that. Yeah,
oh my goodness!
Happened,
Well, someone I
worked
worked at a gym once on the reception, and someone told me that I had a particularly purple aura, and that I know, and I was like, thanks. Because what do you say
sat there
to
just
that?
sort of trying to swat it away, all right? Go,
I was sort
where
of
is
kind
it?
of
Give her it.
looking around, like, okay, is there but he said that's something that you should look into. And I was like,
Had
okay.
you dyed your hair? Had you dyed your hair purple or something like this at the time?
No,
or?
sadly not.
Talk to a doctor about it.
Yeah.
Go down the walk-in centre.
I don't know what a purple aura is supposed to mean. I suppose I should have looked it up, but it's things like that. Some people, like, I find it really interesting.
So that glowing purple neon sign that was behind you.
Yeah,
there,
those.
So my phone just went off again. More insurance problems coming through.
But I just find it very interesting. Is it a gift that, so presumably it's something that can be passed on like height, or is it something that can be passed on like a tendency to be jealous, or that kind of? Is it part of your?
I can. I've just googled about a purple aura.
Mm-hmm.
And,
no, don't Google, mate. You've known this from your research, is what you mean.
I mean, from all my extensive research,
Yeah.
A purple aura means that you're in a good space spiritually, and that you were close to
No, she was in
experiencing.
the reception of the gym.
You were close to experiencing a state of equilibrium and open awareness.
No.
Oh.
You were in a space surrounded by half-naked, muscly men working out in a gym. That's basically what it's saying.
Oh, interesting. So maybe I was at a point where I could have really tapped into that, and then.
In fairness, at the moment, you don't know what colour your aura is right now, so
That's
perhaps
true.
it is still purple.
Maybe it's still purple. Maybe
Let's
I'm
have a
still on the
competition.
brink.
Write in and tell us what colour aura.
If anyone can tell what colour my aura
I
is.
think you have a magenta aura right now.
I'm going to go as far as to say puce.
Puce. Fuchsia. A fuchsia aura.
But yeah, no, that kind of, I've been just sort of reading on, I just find that quite interesting. I don't know whether our paranormal expert can let me know whether it's an inherited.
It's very, going to the aura stuff, we could take a Kirlian photograph of you, which supposedly shows the auras. And the interesting thing about that, there have been people who've like lost a finger, for example, and then they take a photograph, and the aura photograph still shows the missing limb on the hand. So feel free to look that one up. If you go on the internet, look up Curlian photography, spelled with a K. You'll see some interesting examples of that. But going back to the inherited side of stuff, if it is a genetic thing, there's no reason why it wouldn't be. But you also have to take into account if you come from a family that believe in a particular thing. That's my phone going off again. That believe in a certain thing, you are likely to believe in it yourself. If you come from, well, for example, if you come from a Catholic family, the likelihood is you're not going to be a Muslim. You're likely to be a Catholic, or vice versa. Yeah. So you've got to remember that your brain is being programmed by the people that bring you up, and if the people that bring you up believe in psychic ability, if
you
psychic
are much
ability,
more likely to.
If it's real, then you've already opened yourself up to the possibility of it being real, which means you're more likely to experience it.
Because Sam, I believe your mum, doesn't she believe?
Indeed.
So, for example, although it was somebody else. Oh, and there was. Sorry, this is just reminding me. There was a woman in a cafe who told me just before I was pregnant with my second child. She came up to me and made a comment. Oh goodness! I
that's £6.20 or something like that to you. Or
she was sat next to me. You might be able to help me with this story, Tom, because I believe you were there that day. And a woman said to me something
Tom is
about.
Now looking extremely blank.
Yeah, very confused. And she said something about you're pregnant with a girl.
Now, that is a brave thing to do to a woman that you don't know.
Yeah.
Someone say, you're pregnant. No, I'm not.
Thanks very much. No, I just haven't lost the baby weight from my first, but thank you. And then, lo and behold, a few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant, and she is a girl.
What? Really?
Yeah, really. And in fact, now I come to think, it's not actually the first time. Yeah, both times when I was pregnant. The first time, my mum, she rang me the day after I found out. And it was a big surprise. I wasn't trying.
We're not trying. You just accidentally fell on someone.
You're quite
like
trying.
I mean,
there was a bit of effort involved.
I didn't. Oh God, how awkward. So I didn't know I was pregnant. And then I felt quite nauseous, and I took a test almost in that sort of ha, well, let's just clear this one up. Anyway, I was pregnant, and we were both thrilled. But my mum phoned me the next morning and said, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" And I hadn't seen her. In a couple of weeks.
But she'd seen you in Poundland buying the pregnancy test.
Yeah, she saw me.
You were.
But I was in a different
a couple
town.
100 miles away.
Yeah, I was a couple of 100 miles away.
Gosh, she takes stalking to an extreme.
She's very, very determined. She's a very determined
She's very
woman.
small as well.
Very
Can fit
small.
very easily in the boot of the car.
We would not have noticed her. And then, yes, with my second child, some lady in a cafe told me that I was pregnant with another girl. And what was interesting is she said I was pregnant with another girl. So not only knew that I had a daughter who wasn't with me at the time, knew I was going to have another, which I didn't think about at the time because I wasn't pregnant, and again I wasn't really expecting to be. And then a few weeks later,
this wasn't a hospital cafe.
Yeah, she's just taken a test.
You sat there dumbfounded as she produced the scans from an envelope.
This is witchcraft. Yes. So
that's pretty cool. That's very cool.
But that kind of other people, I think, what maybe makes me think, because if it was, because I see what you mean about it being passed on, like my mum is very much a believer, and so I've been brought up with that kind of ethos of it definitely exists and things. So I would be very suggestible to it. And then, but then I find it very interesting, things like that lady spoke to you with no obvious link. And then other people talking to me with no obvious link.
Now, statistically, you're more likely to be psychic if you're female. But some of the best psychics are male. But I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that men, certainly in a Western environment, are brought up to be manly, and so that seems to be a bit of sort of silliness that you wouldn't have.
So that sort of stops them from
and
going with
you
it.
get past the point in childhood where you've learnt what is and isn't real, and you've switched that bit off. Certainly in a lot of men, not in all of them. Whereas girls have a tendency to be allowed to imagine more and sort of play in the mind, as it were, a lot more than boys are. And so that's possibly, if you believe that psychic ability is real, that might be one reason why. And a lot of mediums, I certainly work with huge amounts of people that would say, oh, I'm not a medium, but I am sensitive, or I'm a psychic, or someone like that. And looking into their past, quite a lot of them were awkward children, slightly socially inept somewhat, possibly bullied at school and things like that. And they've latched onto something that makes them slightly different. And they encourage themselves to be different by saying, oh, well, I'm a sensitive. But they never stretch so far as to say I'm a psychic, because that means, oh, well, prove it. But a sensitive, well, you can't prove that. You can't disprove it either. And so a huge amount, and it's often female, that come to ghost hunts and psychic events, they would have latched onto that. And when you talk to them and ask about their history, they all have a very similar background in childhood. So if you want to make a psychic, start bullying your child now. Make sure at school they get picked on. And I'd like to obviously justify my comment by saying not all of them are that. I'm just saying there is quite a lot of people. So whether it's nature or nurture is a different thing.
It does. I mean, that profile sort of fits for me, but never mind. That's
Also,
fine.
don't bully your kids, folks.
It's in the past. I've dealt with it, and wish everyone well.
This episode was brought to you by Project Utri. Do not bully children. Do not. So if you've got children that are speaking to
Men in their room.
Obviously, check it's not a real man.
Yep.
But
Check they're not on the internet.
Check their internet usage.
your child is programmed, as it were, to believe everything you say. Now, for a lot of parents, they'll go in there and say, don't be silly, there's not a man
Nothing
here.
there.
Now, if it's a psychic link to something, and you've just gone in and you've turned off the switch in that child's head by saying, no, there's not there, then it might be that you've broken that link with whatever spirit, ghosty, whatever it is you want to call it, that's in the room, because the child goes, oh, mummy said you're not here, so you're not here. And then suddenly it goes away. And then the child gets older and it's believed more and more what you've said. And so it goes, oh, well, I can't see these things, so they just don't exist. Whereas if you went in there and said, oh, where is the man? And what did he say? And all this, it gives you a positive reinforcement on what the child was actually thinking. So they think, oh, it's real. I can carry on doing this. Now, neither way is the correct way, because all you might be doing is feeding this child's imagination.
Interesting. Well, I'll keep you all posted on the man in the bedroom.
Thank you very much.
When the local newspaper has front page, man found in bedroom.
Man found
in bedroom.
camping in
Sleeping.
child's bedroom.
There have been cases of that where
Oh, yes.
people have set up cameras in a house because they thought it was haunted and caught somebody actually coming out of their attic
Yes.
and eating their
Coming
food
down and
all
getting a
that kind of
snack.
stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's been quite a few cases
There's
of that.
videos on the internet.
Videos
of a lady
online,
living in
yeah, lady-
like a crawl space above.
Shut
above
up.
Yes,
someone's
she
kitchen.
comes down, she goes to the fridge, and then I think, doesn't someone come downstairs or something like to look, and she just scurries back into the crawl
She's
space.
hiding, isn't she?
Yeah.
And this isn't such a paranormal one, but there was a case in a student digs, and there was a man that was doing a similar thing, and they just assumed he was somebody who lived there because there was like 10 or whatever students living in this place. And no, he'd built his own little thing in a cupboard under the stairs and stuff like that. So that wasn't even a hidden one. That was just this guy walking around their house. They just assumed lived there.
Make it so you make it.
Yep, exactly.
Oh man.
There it is.
But yeah, there's a lot of cases of people hiding in people's houses.
Hopefully not an inspiration to people.
No.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't bully your children, folks, and don't
hide in other people's houses. Just knock on the door, ask if they have a spare room.
Sort of check the classifieds or go to a letting agent. It's probably
Yeah.
Sure. So, on that note, let's talk to Ross Andrews.
Hello. How lovely to hear from you. It's nice to see you. Right, well, you quote from a book quite often, don't you?
I mean,
Quite often.
from time to time, I've been.
We're not
known
convinced
to
he knows English apart from
peruse,
these.
a few dusty tomes.
Well, I'm going to do the same thing from an excellent book, but written by a fantastic author.
Who wrote it?
His name's Ross Andrews.
But the paranormal expert.
Yeah, he wrote a book about Paranormal Oxford. So I'm going to talk about a place that you can go and visit in Oxford. Now, this is a nice one because it's outdoors and it's free, which is the most important bit. But it starts off in Blenheim Palace. So if you go to Blenheim Palace, there is possibly a ghost there that's related to the ghost of Fair Rosamond, a woman who possibly took her own life, and she was the mistress of Henry II. Now, you can wander around Blenheim Palace and be there for hours and spend a fortune, or you can head just down the road, and I'm just getting my book out now to check I'm going to say all the right stuff here, to Godstow Nunnery on Trout Island. Anyone heard of the Trout Inn, I think it is, that's over the road from it?
Fantastic.
It sounds amazing.
Well, the Trout Inn, I think, is the pub that Morse goes to in... If you've ever watched the Morse series,
no.
I think that's where they actually film it. But there's a little island over the river from that called the Trout Island, and on that there's the remains of Godstow Nunnery, which is rather haunted. Now, the good thing about this, you can park up, wander around there and spend as long as you want there. You don't have to pay for it or anything. Now, the king was often, we're told, found at the end of a particular thread that was attached to Rosamond, that he would follow through a maze to find her. Right? I know this is very strange. Now, the Queen heard of the king's assignations and took a rather proactive approach to her husband's infidelity by killing the Fair Rosamond's guard and then forcing Rosamond to drink from a poisoned chalice. Okay, so we're not entirely sure how Rosamond died, because in Blenheim Palace she apparently killed herself. In Godstow Nunnery she's poisoned herself, and she was buried in the nunnery church. Now, the important bit about the Trout Inn, because I've done an investigation now, we never actually managed to uncover anything, just a whole bunch of stories. And there's stories such as people walking into... There was a group of about 4 or 5 people, and they were walking into the nunnery, and then their mates walked in, and they said, "Oh, where are the other people?" And they said, "What other people?" And there was a bunch of sort of long... flowing gowned type people wandering into the nunnery, so which they assumed were ghosts of nuns, and there was nowhere for them to go. But also the fields around there's lots of Civil War ghosts that are spotted wandering around the fields. Now, if you go to the Trout Inn, back over the bridge, you're in the Trout Inn, there are ghosts that have been seen, because you can see the nunnery from the Trout Inn, and people have seen the ghost of Fair Rosamond wandering along the riverbanks, to the extent that people assumed it was a real person, and they're actually turned to the waitress that came over to the table and said, "Who is that weird woman wandering around over there?" And they went, "No, that's Fair Rosamond, who was killed in various ways,"
Wow.
depending on who you ask. But the Trout Inn itself is rather haunted, and one interesting thing about the Trout Inn, there are flagstones there that are on a slightly raised bit from the floor, and where Rosamond has been seen in the Trout Inn, you can see her from the sort of the knees up, because it's a raised floor and the floor level was below that. But the flagstones that they've used came from the nunnery that she supposedly haunted. So they're not sure if she haunted the pub because she used to visit Henry II there, because there's a theory that Henry II would be in the building that was there and he would leave a particular light on, and if that light was on, she would come from the nunnery and have late night assignations. Or perhaps the ghost came there once the flagstones came there and it moved with the flagstones, because there's lots of hauntings where a particular haunted object, and we've talked about haunted objects before, it goes from one house to another and the ghost travels with the items. So we're not entirely sure on that one, but the good thing about that, as I said, the nunnery, it's completely free. Park near the pub, go and do a bit of an investigation, come back to the pub, get drunk, go back to the nunnery and find things that weren't there to start with.
Fantastic.
But it's a beautiful little pub and a fantastic place, and if it's a very sunny day or just as the sun's going down, it's a fantastic place to actually hang out. Now, saying that, you could then head off to Oxford, where there is a phenomenal actual ghost walk around there, and I think it's still run by Bill Spector's spooky tour of Oxford. I don't know what it's called. But I think he starts at the castle, which is haunted, and you can read about that in Paranormal Oxford by Ross Andrews. And he goes around. Oxford is a beautiful, beautiful city, so heading around there is beautiful anyway. But he takes you around the whole city, telling you about places. And I bumped into him one night just as he was telling people about the Reverend Spooner. If you know the Reverend Spooner, you heard of Spoonerisms?
Oh yes.
Yes, he's from there. He was from Oxford, and this is the Reverend Spooner. And I'm just looking at my book to find
Sam,
where it
have
is.
you heard of Spoonerisms? You're looking a bit confused.
Well, I will give you an example.
by the way.
He is said to haunt Oxford New College. Now, all the colleges in Oxford you can kind of get into. Sometimes you have to pay a price to get in, and sometimes it's certain... that sounds horrible. You pay a price, you must sacrifice your firstborn before we let you through the door. Or you've got to turn up at certain times and so on. But, this college... had the Reverend William Spooner, and he was there, and he haunts the place. Now, I've got some famous quotes of his that this might explain it to people who don't know who he is. He used to get certain words mixed around, and a couple of his famous ones are, he ran in and said, "You have hissed all of my mystery lessons," instead of "missed all my history lessons." And he once said, "A toast to the queer old dean," when he meant to say "dear old queen." And one of my favourite ones, he came storming in when somebody, enraged by someone not getting to the post in time, he stormed in and exclaimed, "Who has pissed the most?" instead of "Who has missed the post?" But he was also, he was a bit mentally ill, basically, I think is the problem, because he also used to make massive mistakes. For example, he went up to one student at the college and said, "Was it you or your brother that got killed in the war?" And there's another one where he...
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal man. Another one where there was a particular dinner, I think, in somebody's honour, and he went up to somebody and said, "Oh, are you coming to that dinner for such and such?" And he went, "I am him." I said, "Oh, well, never mind, come anyway." So this surprise thing that was happening for him, he's being honoured. So his ghost can be seen in one of the colleges, but there's a brilliant place in Oxford. You'll see, if you're right in the heart of Oxford, there is a cross on the floor where they executed three holy men. There was... I think there were 3 bishops, and I'm going to flick through my book again and get their names, because you might be able to hear these ones. Hugh Latimer, Nicholas Ridley, and I've forgotten the other one, but it was the Archbishop of Canterbury. And they burnt the 3 of them at the stake. And the first one had, as was the custom at the time, somebody had managed to smuggle some gunpowder to him, and they tie it in a bag round your neck so that when the flames get high enough, it blows your head off.
Oh, wow.
But it was quite a large amount of gunpowder, and it literally was like this thing was like a cannonball, went flying off into the sky and ended up in one of the other college's back gardens. His head just landed somewhere else. Now, he was lucky. The second one, when they burnt him, to all accounts, it seems it took a very, very long time, and there wasn't enough wood. And he burnt there for an hour, so much so that his bottom half melted off, and still wasn't dying. And people started going, "This is gross," and they were getting wood from places and dumping it onto the fire. So he actually died quicker and quicker and quicker. So this is quite an impressive firework display going on. The third one managed to last a couple of months, not on the fire, I hasten to add, but he suddenly converted to Catholicism in the hope that it would save him. This is the Archbishop of Canterbury, converted to Catholicism.
Wow.
And he wasn't saved because he was one of the people that signed a declaration to kill Mary's parents, whatever. So it was his fault. And so it didn't matter that he'd signed this thing saying he converted. When they took him to the fire, he put his right hand into the fire first and said, "I want this bit to burn first because this is the bit that signed the confession." Right? And then the rest of him turned into a kebab. But what's weird is that just around the corner from there, you've got this big monument with I think it's the Archbishop on this, and people have seen the monument go up in flames, and they've heard screams and so on of these people dying. But that isn't where it happened. It happened where this little cross on the floor is, just round the corner, but it's the monument that seems to be the bit that's haunted, which is why I was interested in that, because it's very similar to the Rosamond thing. It's not the place the person actually was. Perhaps it's got something to do with a cultural memory of people remembering something, sort of projecting it onto this monument, and that's what people are actually picking up on, not the ghosts themselves or the ghost of a fire. So if you're in Oxford, those are free places you can actually go and have a look at. Now, I will tell you the dates you should go, because if I I had this book open with the dates on, and then I've just closed the book. Yes. I will just quickly read this. The screams can still be heard to this day. Apparently this is a nice punctual ghost. As I've been informed, the best time to hear it is around midnight on October the 16th every year. Oh. And the Rosamond one, I can't remember the date of that one, but there's a particular date of that. But the best way to find out the date for that is to buy the book. Paranormal Oxford by Ross Andrews. Now, I do have a problem with ghosts that appear on a certain time and a certain day, due to the fact that it's not that long ago that we converted to a different calendar system and lost 2 weeks. So what was October the 16th wasn't,
is now,
is now 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to see, which leads you to think it's a cultural memory rather than an actual physical ghost that's going, have we allowed for the clocks to go back yet? Have we done that one yet? So I think it's kind of the local populace sort of projected that image onto something, and you're somehow coming along and picking up on it. And because of that date, and we have one here, Prestbury, we've talked about it before, the Black Abbot that wanders around and is seen on New Year's Eve, seen at Easter, seen at Halloween, seen at particular times and days. Yet he supposedly is from a time before we moved the calendar forward 2 weeks. So there you go. That's from Paranormal
Let's
Oxford.
head to Oxford on the 16th of October. I think that's...
Yes, that's the best time to be there.
I think we're going to have to head to the nunnery as well.
Get thee to a nunnery. But that's a free one, completely free. Those ones are. The good thing about Oxford, there is a lot of ghosts that you can see out in the street, and I do thoroughly recommend the ghost tour there. It's very, very good.
Well, there we are. Anybody got anything they want to add?
Yes, if anyone's selling a car really cheaply, mine needs replacing very rapidly. Otherwise, we're not going to Oxford.
Otherwise, we're not going to Oxford. We're all piling Sambians.
Oh, yes.
Cleo?
On the back of his skateboard.
Then, yeah.
On the back of his skateboard.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I can drag you all along.
We're going in drag, apparently.
In drag on a skateboard to
October
Oxford.
the 16th.
Join us!
October the 16th, we'll be in drag on skateboards looking for burning bishops.
At midnight. Well, I mean...
On that note...
Yeah, I got nothing. So I feel like that is probably a suitable time to wrap. If
you can call that suitable.
At the very least, let's just stop the madness before it goes any further. So, thank you very much for listening, as ever. I have been Tom Jordan. I probably still will be next time as well. Would you all like to say hi or bye or thank you very much?
Not particularly.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much.
Hi, bye. Thank you very much.
See you later.
Sambi, and you're so cool. Bye for now.